Welcome to Renters' Rights Radio.
Welcome back to Renters' Rights Radio with attorney Debi Rumph, founder of the law offices of Debi Rumph. Debi has spent years helping Florida renters understand their rights, protect themselves under pressure, and take strategic steps when a landlord is trying to push them out. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about what to do when you're facing an eviction. My dear, welcome back.
I'm doing wonderful, Evan. How are you doing?
So, Debi, many renters feel overwhelmed the moment they receive something from a landlord about unpaid rent or ending a lease. What does facing eviction usually mean from the tenant's point of view when this starts?
All right. 95% of all evictions is going to start with either a 3-day notice or a 7-day notice. Okay. In my practice, I tell my clients that this does not mean that they're going to be out on the streets in 3 days or 7 days. Instead, what this does mean is that my clients have a few days in which to make a decision. Now, this decision is going to be impactful and very important. And basically, when a client receives either a 3-day or a 7-day notice, I tell them that they have a fight or flight decision to make.
So when someone receives that notice that confuses them or it feels urgent, as that urgency gives them that urgency, what should they focus on first so they don't panic or overlook something that's more important?
They should focus on what they control. There are several things that they can control. They can control understanding the reason why the landlord is attempting to evict them. You will be surprised how many tenants don't know what the grounds of the eviction are, why the landlord is unhappy. Second, they can control getting help to understand what needs to be done to attempt to resolve the issue with regard to the landlord. You'll be surprised, many tenants don't know that there should be an attempt to negotiate or resolve the dispute so that the eviction does not necessarily have to go through.
So for tenants trying to understand what their landlord is actually allowed to do, what are some early signs that the situation is moving toward that formal eviction?
All evictions start with a complaint against the tenant. And these complaints rarely occur without the tenant knowing that the landlord has a complaint. If the landlord perceives that the tenant is not going to do anything about the landlord's complaint, that is when the landlord usually will serve the tenant with the 3-day or 7-day notice. Now, the service of the 3-day or 7-day notice is the actual start of the eviction process. In Florida, evictions follow a very specific process, and these notices must be served on the tenant before the filing of the eviction. And now, the reason for this, Evan, is that the law wants to give the tenant a right to make things right before such a severe remedy of kicking the tenant out is approached. Now, if the landlords try to bypass this process and not give the tenant an opportunity to make amends, then the courts will deny the eviction and not evict the tenant because the tenant didn't have a right to make things right. And unless the tenant agrees otherwise, the landlords must follow this procedure of giving the tenant an opportunity to make things right before filing the eviction in court.
So if a renter wants to address the issue before things escalate, what practical steps can help them stay organized and understand their options?
The number one answer to that is early and effective communication. The second thing that they could do is identify what they can control and what they can't control and work and expend their energies in the area where they do have the most control. The third thing that they could do is seeking help from a third party, whether it's a professional or a friend, to help them try to figure out if there's something they can do to encourage the landlord not to file the eviction.
So some tenants wonder whether communication helps or hurts their situation. How can someone reach out in a way that protects them rather than creates more confusion?
Well, it depends. And it really depends on what you say, right? So what the tenant says is quite important. I find that a tenant that communicates early and effectively with their landlord can resolve issues and an eviction can be averted, right? So if you're a tenant, you want to reach out with solutions and not excuses. Do you want to know what the worst thing you can say to a landlord if you're not able to pay the rent?
Wow.
The worst thing that you could say to a landlord is, I can't pay you because I have to pay my other bills. Okay.
Mm,
So if you say that, you're signing up for a fast pass to eviction. It's very offensive to landlords to know that you're paying other bills but not them.
mhm,
So communication is highly effective, but it really depends on what it is you're saying when you do reach out.
hmm. So Ms. Debbie, paperwork and deadlines can feel intimidating. What do tenants generally need to keep track of so they don't miss something that could affect the outcome?
Rent payment dates. That's huge. Huge. Grace periods to your rent payment date, whether you
Mm,
have one. A lot of tenants just assume they have a grace period, and that is not true. Okay. If you are served a 3-day notice, you want to know when that 3-day notice expires because you need to make your decision. Are you going to fight or are you going to flight, right? Are you going to come up with the money? When is your deadline? When does that time stop ticking? Likewise, if you were served with a 7-day notice, when are your 7 days up? Do you have a right to cure, or is this are you in a situation where you don't have a right to cure that violation? If an eviction is filed, tenants want to pay attention to when they were served the summons, and they
mhm,
want to know when their response to that eviction complaint is due. If there is a requirement to put money in the court registry, if an eviction is filed, you want to know the due date. You want to know the amounts. Those things are very important because if the tenant makes a mistake, an eviction can go through without a hearing, without notice. It'll be a default eviction, and they're very hard to undo.
hmm. And finally, without naming specifics, is there a situation you've handled that shows how taking early strategic action helped the tenant navigate an eviction more effectively?
Certainly. A case that comes to mind is we had a client who had a landlord who was complaining about an unauthorized pet. So we got involved and we apologized for our client's oversight and indicating that the client didn't fully understand the law and that this was an emotional support animal that the client just neglected to present the paperwork to the landlord in a timely manner. We also negotiated with the landlord that until the pet was authorized as an emotional support animal, that my client would temporarily remove the pet from the premises. Now, because we made that gesture of goodwill and because we were involved, and it was likely that this was not going to be over with a simple denial of the emotional support animal or pet, the landlord acquiesced, and my clients were able to keep their pet and they averted an eviction.
Hmm. Miss Debbie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Evan.
All right. That's it for today's episode of Renters Rights Radio with attorney Debi Rumph. If you're a Florida renter facing pressure, notices, or threats of eviction, you deserve clear information and strategic support. Visit DebiRumph.com to learn more about the unbundled legal services Debi provides and how you can take control of your situation. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like, subscribe to the show, and leave a review if you found this episode helpful. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.